Ever been told that you're not enough? Have you ever been told that you're not good enough?
Yep.
Have you ever been told that you're not the right one for the job?
Today they call it overqualified.
Today they call it overqualified, Al says. Oh, you know, I can't keep all the numbers in my head about Goliath's armor and all that, but for some reason that one about the 15-pound head on the spear sticks out, or rather sticks in at the thought of being told you're not good enough. Oh, you're not the one. Oh. You know, there's a couple responses that often that we have when we encounter that experience. One of them, unfortunately, being the one where we believe what we're being told, and it sort of doubles us over. And we're crippled. And we just want to slink under the rug and get away. And then there's another response, and it's more the I'll show you. And I get that image of combat boots and prints on somebody's back. You know what I mean? I'll show you. But apparently there's another response to being told that you're not the one and that you're not good enough. And that's the response of David. Here was a young boy who was laughed at not only by the king when he said, I'll take on this Goliath, I'll go where these massive hulking warriors. I think of Evan when I think of that, I gotta tell you, okay? Yeah, you know, where these, not that you wouldn't have gone to the massive hulking part, okay? That's what I mean. You know, and these massive hulking warriors, you know, we're over here cowering, and yet David, this little guy, comes and says, I'll go. And not only does the king laugh at him, not only does Goliath laugh at him and say, what's that little stick you got there? You think I'm a dog? You're going to kind of like push me like a dog? But even his own brothers laugh at him and say, what did you do, David? Did you just come to get a good seat for the fight so you can laugh at us while we get our butts whipped? Huh? But David's response to being told he's not good enough, he's not the one, is to go and stand before this challenge and to say to this Goliath, you come at me with javelin and spear and sword, and I come at you with the Lord God Almighty. The one that you have scoffed at is the one that's going to see you rolling in the ground. And so the response to being told, you're not good enough, you're not enough, you're not the one for this job, is the response of David, which is to say, wait a minute, I am a child of God. And I have been gifted with this life for reason and for purpose and for God's call. You know, when we read those stories in the Old Testament and the New Testament too, but when we read them and we tell them in Bible school and we tell them in Sunday school, we oftentimes tell them as, you know, here's some of our heroes of the faith. You know, and certainly David is right up there at the top of the heap, you know. But in my opinion, these stories were never meant to turn these guys into like action figures. Action figures, thank you. Action figures, you know, that you can set on your shelf and say, oh, you know, I'll give you a David for a Joshua, you know, or you know, I want to be like David when I grow up. I don't think that was ever the intent of the stories. Because if you notice in the stories, what often happens is God makes sure that they take the hardest path possible. It's like, oh, well, maybe it's not difficult enough that you're just a little guy, let's just give you a slingshot, instead of like, whatever. And the purpose in all of that is so that we don't walk away from the stories with some sense of, oh, wow, look at David, I want to be like David. The purpose of the story is that we walk away with a sense of wonder and a sense of amazement that the power of God has gotten us through once again. That's the purpose. And so we get to the New Testament then, and here we have the disciples and Jesus, and they've been busy, and they decide they're going to cross to the other side of the lake. Now don't miss the importance of that. They've decided not to mealy-mouse around by just going around by the way of the shoreline. So, if something happens, we can jump out of the boat and swim to shore. They're going to go across to the other side of the lake, which means they're going to take the big risk. Hint, hint, church. The big risk. So off they go. And then suddenly the storm comes up. And it says the disciples are paralyzed with fear. Oh, there's that word again, fear. Now, Jesus is in the back of the boat taking a nap, and disciples are terrified. Fear can do so many things to us. There's a story about Nikita Khrushchev. How many of you remember Nikita Khrushchev? Remember? He was the leader of the Soviet Union after Stalin. And so the story goes that he was talking to a large group of people in a large hall at one point. And Stalin, many of you may recall, was known for killing thousands and thousands and thousands of people. If he didn't like the way you brushed your teeth, he sent the death squad to visit your door. Okay? So thousands were killed. So Khrushchev then, still part of the Soviet Union at that time, is talking to these people, and eventually they started, trying to talk about some of the awful things that happened, and wanting to contrast between then and now. And so somebody, knowing that Khrushchev had been part of Stalin's leadership, somebody from the audience yelled out, said, "Why didn't you do anything?" And Khrushchev didn't blink an eye. He said, "Who said that?" Not a whisper in the hall. Not a movement in the hall. And Khrushchev said, "That's why. That's why no one did anything. That's why no one said anything." Fear will paralyze us. It'll keep us from doing what we know we need to do, what we ought to do. It'll cause us to say and do irrational things. Here's these disciples, and they've been with Jesus now for a good while. He's taking care of their every need. They've seen Him tell demons to come from people. They've seen Him heal people. They've seen Him do anything and everything at this point. And still, the storm comes, and what's the first thing that comes out of their mouth? "Jesus, don't you care about us?" Has that ever happened to you? You've given yourself to somebody, you've given yourself, you've done, you've given, and then a tough time comes, and the first thing out of their mouth is, "You don't care about me." Fear has a way of paralyzing us. Fear has a way of bringing out the irrational. But Jesus stood up in that boat. Now, I got to tell you, generally, the Gospels kind of mealy-mouse things. They kind of knew that by the time we get to our day and age, we'd be kind of laid back. And so the words that Jesus says are, "Be still," to the storm. I don't think it was like that at all. A lot of scholars agree with me. A lot of scholars say Jesus stood up and said, "Shut up!" Hey, he was in the middle of a good nap. That's what I would do, And the waves calmed, and the wind stopped. Then the disciples were even more scared because it's like, who is this man? Who is this man that can calm the waves and tell the wind to stop, to shut up?